Speaking freedom, giving you the answers to be free. Be free.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight's performance is about to begin.
Welcome to Speaking Freedom TV with Dr.Kaci, and today we have a special guest. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Hi, I am Verum. I am going to try not to freeze and kind of go with the flow. I have a lot to say, I guess, so one step at a time. My name is Verum. I am a certified peer specialist for the state of Ohio, which means I work in mental behavioral health, work in recovery with people in active addiction. There's a 30-day detox on the floor that I work on, and there's an inpatient just above. So to work this job that I have means I have to be in recovery myself. I am 5 years now as of January, and that means I am also what I like to call a veteran of the war on drugs. As a regular statistic of the opioid epidemic and just your modern average everyday millennial, I kind of come from that side of the dialogue, I guess,
So, what do you do for a living now?
I am
outside of the peer support specialist. Is that your main and only job?
For now, yes. For now,
Okay.
I am what's just my title is a peer coach, and I do help others that are in active addiction, kind of from this side of the fence, to show them
that it's possible.
The grass is greener on the other side, and take it from me, I guess. And but I am also on the side. I have a lot boiling and cooking up. I have a blog for now. That's the kind of core thing there. I have a blog that is based on a brand. Essentially what I'm doing is brand building from scratch, and it's completely mental,
So tell us about your brand a little bit.
So it's a portmanteau of the words vagabond and bard. So it's vagabard, and that is sort of a beacon, if you will, for the creative wandering soul. That's kind of what it means to be a vagabond. Vagabond is not necessarily me. I am one, right? My name is Verum, but I am a vagabond. Is kind of how that works. And I'm trying to build this community in a way that is all encompassing and ultimately stands for the freedom of expression and the and mental health awareness. So those are the kind of the two core things at the heart of it. But sort of from a creative aspect, yeah.
What does freedom mean to you, and what brought you on the show? What made you decide you wanted to share your story, and what is your journey to freedom?
I just liked sort of the platform that you have to offer. I think that it was just right. It was aligned with what I'm doing is kind of what appealed to me. And what freedom is to me is just independence through equity. That's kind of the way I look at it. It was defined to me as a small child that and this was explained to me to explain like what it means to be an American, is kind of the context behind it. Is to be able to express oneself as much as they'd like to a point until it crosses another person's boundaries, so you can express yourself as much as you want up until those boundaries. And I always thought that was a good way to put it, and that kind of always resonated with me. And I guess, in a way, aimed to achieve that ever since.
Okay, so what was the thing you had the hardest time getting free from? And then how did you conquer that challenge?
I mean, for me, I would like to say the easy answer is drugs and alcohol. That is the easy answer, but really it goes deeper than that. And,
Hmm.
you know, there's a spiritual aspect. There's the there's a lot of different ways you can the people call it the monkey on your back or the chip on your shoulder or
Hmm.
whatever. Um, but I just call it myself in the reflection, the me that is not me. And trying to put that person in their place, that's been the hardest thing is understanding that I am me on this side of the mirror. I am not the one looking back at me, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. Because
Hmm.
often, like this is another thing that resonated with me is that I think this was honestly like a Snapple cap or some random thing. But that throughout our lives, no one person can ever see with their own eyes what they look like. And that's just like the definition of existential, right? and and so all we have are reflections, just
Hmm.
mirrors. That's the only way that we can see ourselves through
Hmm.
through whether it's an actual mirror or a body of water,
Hmm. Hmm.
or on video, however it may be. That's the only way that you can see yourself, and in a way that's seeing yourself through other people's eyes. That's seeing
Hmm.
yourself the way that other people see yourself. And all that really matters is how you see yourself, and that's the one that you're seeing is not that same person. And I know that's very pedantic in a way, but it's the truth.
I mean, I guess I can understand, and the reason why I say I guess I can understand is because although you are looking at yourself through a mirror, it is not the real reflection of you that others see, literally,
True.
because people don't just see who you are in the physical sense, they also experience who you are. So it's very difficult to experience yourself through somebody else's eyes without them telling you whatever it is that they experience. But that's subjective because um your experiences teach you about life. So I could be doing something noble, honest, integral, but if you've experienced only bad things, you won't see it from the standpoint that I am giving the energy from. You will see it from a guarded perspective, and sometimes it will be foggy because you're used to a certain thing, so anything outside of that will feel strange, and it will kind of make it difficult to even see what the person is doing or reflecting because of whatever views that you've been ingrained with from your environment, your youth, and all of those things. So you said that you've been sober for 5 years.
Mhm.
um, I don't want to trigger you, but I would like to know what led you into drugs and alcoholism.
It was sort of a steady climb, I guess. It was just rooted in childhood, like most trauma. Uh,
So
Lack
is
of
go.
discipline,
Mhm, mhm,
abandonment issues,
mhm, mhm, mhm.
no one to really point me in the right direction. And not saying that's not that, not to sound like a cop out, like, oh, no one was there to
I
point me
mean,
away from drugs, but like I think it's more the fact that um like missing out on the direction in general. So I
mhm,
was
mhm.
left to my own devices, idle hands kind of thing. That's just where it all started, right? But then there was a lot of layers that kind of kept me going.
So let's start out with saying that there is no cop outs when you decide to recognize that there is a cop out, like that you could be used
Right.
as a cop out. because a lot of people that make excuses for themselves, they'll never say, well, I'm making excuses. No,
Right.
they are totally reliant upon those excuses without recognizing that you are kind of in control and you can make the decisions to change your life. So I don't never want you to think that understanding that there were issues that may have led you into drugs or alcohol, but it's not a cop out. That is your experience that led you there. It's only a cop out if you use it to stay in those places mentally,
Right.
physically, and
That
spiritually.
makes sense. Yeah.
So don't ever feel like the things that led you into your hard time is a cop out. Those is just simply lessons for you to learn from as you are continuing to grow through your journey. Um so how long were you a substance abuser?
On my drug of choice, 10 years. I was kind of in active use for 15. So that's the best way to put it, really, I guess.
Okay, and then so what helped you to come out of that abuse, that addiction? Because I know like okay, so I started drinking probably when I was in the 7th or 8th grade. My mom used to kind of leave me and abandon me a lot of times, like whether it was at school and I needed a ride or had to find my own way home, or whether she just didn't come around for days at a time, or whatever the case may be, or living with other people and not feeling like I had somebody. And I used to sneak into my grandmother's liquor. And so that's when drinking started for me. And that's when, even when I started smoking weed, I remember being like about 14 and I was at home by myself. I was kind of left to roam the streets and figure out life on my own a lot. So that led to me experimenting with some things, but because I had family that had stronger drug addictions, I never went further than weed or alcohol, which was a good thing for me. But I also know the effects that it has on people because I've watched people in my family struggle with those things.
Hmm. Yeah, I can relate, being left to your own devices, like I said, um, and just sort of wanting to, I don't know, there's something that felt grown about it,
Hmm.
and
If you're on your own, that at a young age, you feel like that's a part of being an adult because
right,
adults can do those things. So how
right.
did you overcome or conquer that challenge? Like what was your awakening moment that said, you know what, I need to get clean?
The easy answer is just the year 2017. In general, that was a rough year. I started, as an opioid addict would, I started to get into some trouble, thefts and such, and you know, one thing led to another, and I did some time, and you know, did they did put me in like court ordered rehabs, what they call CBCF,
Hmm.
and community based correctional facility for any listeners that don't know. And I went twice. The first time I just really didn't care. I wanted to just get out and just, so I just did what was expected of me, and that
Hmm.
was all. I sort of always was interested in this field, if you will. I not having that guidance during the age like where I would be going to college, right? Or picking the right direction at that age. I didn't have the right guidance. And so I made bad decisions and unwise decisions. And so, as in like career moves and stuff like that. And, what I'm getting at is I really wanted to go to college to explore philosophy and psychology and sociology. Those were the things I wanted to go to school for anyway. And by the time I was in my second CBCF, I kind of realized that I was getting education. Um, if I wanted it to be education.
Mhm.
And I just was getting it on the streets, the school of hard knocks, if you will.
Yeah.
And at this point, I kind of feel like I've graduated the school of hard knocks. Might even have my master's by now. I don't know.
You probably got
Um,
a doctorate.
maybe. I think now I'm getting my doctorate at this point. And but no, everything was like just shitty, and I wanted it to be better. And I was very much aware by the time I went to my second CBCF, which was 2015. And it was even before then, really, but I was by that time I was aware that I could get myself out of it with the right decisions, right?
Mhm.
And I had made a friend who taught me that, even because at that point I had no friends. I had lost any form of, healthy communication, even with my own mother, who
Mhm.
had her own issues. And we became toxic. She's a brittle diabetic, and so I took care of her a lot of the
Mhm.
time. This was beforehand even. And it kind of just became a codependent relationship where, I helped her out with her diabetes, and we both got high together. She gave me a place to
Mhm.
live, and it was just kind of one of those really, really, and those kinds of things happen with boyfriend girlfriend a lot,
Mhm.
and it's like when it's your mother, it's very, very
It's
hard,
different. Yes.
very hard. And so, but at the end of the day, she was still a rock in my
Mhm.
life, right? But other than that, I mean, I do have some family, limited, uh, just no friends though. And somewhere down the line, I made a friend, and it taught me that no, I've accepted that I can't make any friends, but I
Mhm.
can. I really can.
Mhm.
They're out there, few and far between, but they're out there. And
Mhm. Mhm.
that was sort of the beginning of me kind of getting better, realizing, oh, my perspective has been wrong this entire time. So kind of changing paths. Anyway, he had his own issues as well, and over time started to use heroin. He was on pills when we first met, and he kind of started to use heroin. And he was a musician, so he kind of pulled me into the music scene. I'm not a musician, but going to shows and stuff, getting me out of the house, and actually doing things rather than sitting around getting high, getting in trouble. And so by the time I got out of the CBCF the second time, I was like, okay, I want to get better. And I had made a conscious decision at one point. It started with, okay, I no longer want to be grimy. Like, I didn't even want to, like, screw over other junkies. Like, I didn't even
Mhm.
want to, like,
Mhm.
rip off their bags. Like, okay, I'm not going to be grimy to anybody. And so I started that. And then it was, okay, I'm done stealing. By the time I got out of the second CBCF, that's when I agreed, okay, I'm done stealing as well. I am going to get high with my own money, or I'm not going to get high. And so that alone made it to where I got high less,
Mhm.
less and less and less and less. And then having a friend and getting out, it was less and less. And then it became just a strict self-medication thing is what it ended up evolving into. And so that's what it was. And then it was trying to taper down, taper down, taper down, hashtag harm reduction.
Mhm.
And, that's what it was. Before, I didn't know what harm reduction was at that point, but that is what it was. And so by the time 2017 got around, that was the year of the carfentanil, and fentanyl had already been around.
Mhm.
It had, graduated from heroin to fentanyl, and people were already dying left and right.
Mhm. And
Um,
it's bad in Ohio too.
so bad. Dayton was known as the ground zero. That's what I was told a lot.
Mhm.
It was known as the ground zero of the heroin epidemic. So yeah, didn't really have a good you know, setting behind me either. So 2017, it had evolved from fentanyl to carfentanil.
What's carfentanil?
It's not even fentanyl. It's elephant tranquilizer is what it really is. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. People were dropping like flies. I was
How do
living,
people get into elephant tranquilizers? Like how does that happen?
it just gets put on the street and people are told it's heroin.
Mm. And then
Yeah.
you addicted to something else and you don't even really know what it is.
Well, with the carfentanil, people weren't even getting addicted to it. They were just dying. Like it
Oh.
was basically poison. It was almost like poisoning the water supply,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
but
mm-hmm,
they poisoned the heroin supply, in a way. Yeah. So there was that summer of 2017 where I'm sure you could look up the statistics and find it real easy, you know, especially in Ohio, is
right.
people were dropping uh dozens a day, hundreds a weekend. And I don't know what the end number was for that summer, but I'm sure it was very high. And I had reunited rather with a an old childhood friend I had a crush on. We ended up dating, and at the end of that summer, my friend had really went down a dark path, started messing with meth as well, which is something I have tried but never cared for. So he was dating somebody as well, and she used meth and was a bad influence per se. And yeah, he was real bad off, to be honest. And there had been periods of time I remember where like him and I would stop talking, but we would like pick right back up where we left off. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't that we stopped talking to each other. It's just we had our own shit going on, you know?
Right.
And which again taught me what it's like to have a real friend as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember that summer, it was his birthday was on the summer solstice. Um we had a mutual friend who lived in Boston. And this guy was actually a friend of mine from way back. I introduced him and they had been talking and stuff. And we were staying the night at a friend's house. He wakes me up. He says, "Hey man, you want to go to Boston?" I said, "What?" I just woke up. And he's like, "Yeah, well, I found out he'd been up all night. I just found out that Mike's birthday, me and Mike have the same birthday. Let's go party." And I was like, "With what money?" Right at that time, his car was being worked on, so he was driving his grandfather's minivan at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so he was able to kind of get some money gathered up. His mom gave him some birthday money, and we were off. And I was at that point in time trying to get clean. I remember having Suboxone instead of heroin on me, and I was like, "Dude, I
What
do
is
not."
Suboxone?
Suboxone is a medication for it's a harm reduction medication. It's
Mm-hmm.
like it's like methadone in a way. I don't know if you know what Vivitrol is or anything like that, but all those
It's like a
medications
substitution type of medicine.
sort of, yeah. Um, you can it blocks your opiate receptors
Mm-hmm.
so that it curbs the cravings,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also a mild pain reliever
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so that it can fuel some
Actually
of
help you with the pain if you deal with pain,
yes,
but
yes,
also not make you addicted to the
right,
painkiller. Okay, I got
exactly. And it's just enough to kind of fuel your dopamine receptors,
you.
like
Probably
without
take the
getting
edge off.
without getting you high. So it does just it's almost like bare minimum. It does
Mm-hmm.
just what you want the heroin to do, but not on an addictive level.
Right.
Even though it is addictive, don't get me wrong. But
I mean,
it's
everything can be addictive, especially
right.
because your body get codependent on it, and then
Yes.
your body cannot learn how to function without it. That's why personally, that's how I look at supplements and a lot of things that people use as far as vitamins, because your body is now craving those vitamins more than being
Mhm.
able to produce the things that it's supposed to produce from
Yeah.
a more natural way. So
Right.
for me, even when I think about people talk about Dr. Sebi and all the natural remedies that he had going on, but if you look at the totality of it, when it came down to his final days, without being on that specific regimen, it was more of a hindrance than an actual help. I mean, it might have helped in the initial stages, but when you cut off so much and you structure your diet too much, it's almost like if you put yourself in a bubble and then you go outside, you're going to get sick because you've been in a bubble all
Oh
this time.
yeah.
It makes you more
Absolutely.
susceptible. So I
Absolutely.
understand exactly what you mean because you definitely become codependent on anything that you take regularly.
Right. Yeah, and it's definitely addictive. But even if you got addicted to that and substituted one for the other, it's a medication. It's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna kill
Mm-hmm.
you, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's so much safer than heroin.
Manageable.
Yeah, manageable is a good word. So at that point in time, I was going through, and putting in the effort to, getting money but spending it on Suboxone instead of heroin. So that
Mm-hmm.
alone was a step in the right direction.
Right.
And so I was just like, man, my only worry is I don't want to be stuck in Boston sick. That
Right.
was the only thing. I don't want to end up having to buy drugs off of some random person in
Mm-hmm.
some random city. Like I just didn't want to be put in that scenario. And so we had a good time. I got a shitty tattoo. You know how it goes.
You
You
got
know,
something to remember the moment by.
yes. And so he was real bad off on meth at that point.
Mm-hmm.
We came back. He had managed to not get in any trouble. We came back. That was June. I'd say July it was. And we ended up getting pulled over and he got caught with some meth. And that really took a toll on him, like actually like facing like jail
Mm-hmm.
time and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. Because he had managed to kind of keep that whole life a secret, even though he was like obviously on some heavy drugs. And when he was like in front of his family, like nothing was like, he never
Blatant.
came out about it.
Mm-hmm.
They knew he smoked weed and stuff like that, but they just kind of like don't ask, don't tell kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which is
So
happens in most families.
yeah, yeah. So he just managed, and he's one of the most like he's a rare case. I've seen him do heroin and then put it down, and then do meth and then put it down, and then, but it just got to a point where shit became unmanageable for him,
Mm-hmm.
and even he succumbed to it. And but there for a long time, I had never seen anybody with willpower to like, I'm gonna, you know, explore, heroin, experiment, and then
Right.
do
And
it
then
for
be
a
able to bounce
weekend and
back.
just,
Yeah.
yeah, and do it like over and over again. Like there was a time where him and I did it for like 2 weeks and then he didn't touch it for like 3 months. I was like, what? So I don't know. But even he succumbed to it, and right after he got in trouble, I heard less from him. And I thought that was a good sign because I thought he was getting better. And I thought that because he had to tell his parents because I think the
Mm-hmm.
car got impounded that night. So, he had to come out about it. And I thought that that meant like, oh, his family's getting him help and blah, blah, blah. I just thought that it was a good thing. Um, and I started talking to this girl, and I was like all happy and wanting to talk to him, being like, hey, I got a new girlfriend. I want you to meet her, kind of thing. And I was living with my mom at the time, and I just came home and it was like a nightmare. And I found out he had overdosed and died. And
I'm so sorry to hear that.
yeah, I appreciate it. And I've processed it. It's been a long time since then at this point. And it still is strange how it was like everything was fine, and then I came home and it was on Facebook, and it was just like, what?
And yeah, when you hear stuff on Facebook, it's like
I was like, this is
shocking.
fake. This is
Yeah.
fake, right? Fake news. And neither me nor his girlfriend were allowed at the funeral. So that was fucked up. And I
Because
want to,
his family blamed you all.
yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I have my own guilt that I have to battle,
Live with. Mm-hmm.
as somebody who was an enabler for sure,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but how dare you put all of that on me,
Mm-hmm.
he would have rolled, he was rolling in his grave knowing that you didn't let me, his best friend, at the funeral. Like, that's fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
Because, but it sounds like that they had an issue dealing with acceptance in their family.
yeah,
Because especially if they've known that he looked like he was on something. Because when you're on drugs, it's definitely noticeable at family functions and things like that because you're not acting in the way that your normal behavior would have you to be.
yeah,
So, but it's easier, like we talked about earlier when we talked about cop outs and placing blame, it's easier for them to blame other people than to accept the fact that their child, nephew, son, brother, grandson had a problem and was living with that problem, and then because it makes them have to face how did they overlook it,
right,
how did they miss it.
right,
So instead of accepting responsibility and taking accountability for the things that's going on in his life or had went on in his life and how their family structure kind of led him to that, it was easier to shift blame on you all.
oh,
And I
absolutely,
apologize for them that you even had to go through that because that's crazy. Like
yeah,
uh to blame somebody that definitely probably wasn't even with him at the time. Now
right,
I can see if you was right there with them, that may be a little bit more like, hey, well, why didn't you do something? But if you're not there and are blaming you, then that is very
no,
troubling.
I wasn't with
So
him since the time that he got pulled over. I hadn't seen him since, really. That was the last time I saw him in person. I talked to him a couple times afterwards, and a mutual friend that he met, that was like his friend that he introduced to me, who I'm still friends with to this day, um, was there. He was there, and he was allowed at the funeral,
see, but
But
they in the grand scheme of the way he get caught when he did get caught because you were with him, they probably and he might have just because this is what addicts do. It might not have
right,
been personal, but said that it was yours or blamed you in
right,
his trying to defend himself. So normally families just go off of whatever makes them feel again most comfortable
right.
and less responsible for
Well,
the things that led up to it.
not only that, but there were times when he would blame stuff on me. Like,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was okay with it, like, you know what I mean? But he'd be late for something or whatever, and I'd be like, just blame it on me, dude. It's fine. Like, it's whatever. His mom liked me at first, and then she kind of started to dislike me more and more. I don't
Because he
know.
was blaming everything on you. So now you look like the
Right.
trouble friend when
Right.
probably he was probably. And again, we're not trying to defame or,
Hi, I'm Casey, Dr. Kaci. Welcome to Speaking Freedom. We are happy to have you and we hope that we are able to help you in every way possible. Have a good evening.
anything like that. But normally, um, when I was growing up, I was not a bad kid. But I had a friend that was a little bit more facetious and a little bit more, out there than me. That if she came around, I would tell her to ask my mom for stuff that I felt like my mom might say no to me to because I knew that she was like the angel that my mom would always say yes to. So we
Right.
kind of used and played on that to kind of play my mother. So I get it. That's what
Mm-hmm.
friends do. But
Right.
and as a parent, she would have had to known that. But when you're trying to make excuses for your child, you're going to look
Right.
for everybody to
Oh,
look
absolutely.
for
I was an easy
scapegoat.
scapegoat for sure. And I got threats on Facebook because of it. Because, they told other people, like, yeah, this is what happened. Oh my God, I can't believe it. Yeah, he was
Mm-hmm.
hanging out with that piece of shit, blah, blah,
Right,
blah.
right,
Shit
right.
like that, and I got death threats and all kinds of stuff, man. It was wild. Like,
That
really
and
wild.
that's crazy because I couldn't even imagine, especially because you weren't there at the time, like and y'all hadn't been talking like that for all the backlash to come on you. So let me ask you a question. How did all of those things, aside from, of course, helping you to push you to go into rehab, or to really, not even at this point, I don't think you had already did rehab and you were already taking your steps to recovery.
Right.
So okay, now you saw your best friend die from an overdose, and now you're moving from that. How else did that change you mentally and spiritually?
I mean, honestly, everything changed. Everything changed in a second. Everything was one way. I was in the honeymoon phase with this new girlfriend, and we were out and about. We came home. I checked Facebook and I had like 7 messages. It was like, "Oh my God, did you hear? Oh my God, did you hear? Oh my God, did you hear?" And then it was, "I'm gonna fucking kill you. I'm gonna beat your ass next time I see you." It was like I was like, "What the fuck?" In like 1 second. And yeah. And so 6 weeks later, and this was not like the first time this had happened. Well, the first time this happened, yes. But there were similar situations where I would walk in and find my mother like unresponsive. Not because of drugs. Like I never really, well, no, I take that back. There was a couple of drug scares, but
just being a diabetic and
diabetic,
health
yeah.
issues.
Yep. And I checked on her and I went to bed. It was like midnight and 11 o'clock, and I went to bed. Woke up at 9 in the morning and I found her just sitting there cold. I thought she was dead, and I was terrified. I had, a glucagon shot. I tried to give her, some glucose, called 911. Her blood sugar wasn't even coming up at all. They were in single digits. That's the lowest I'd ever seen them. And they'd been low, and I've never seen single digits. And the fact that she survived it all is insane. She would look at me and she was just staring right through me, just was not responding at all. They ended up taking her to the hospital. She was obviously in a diabetic coma. The problem was they didn't know for how long, and they were worried about brain damage, and they ran scans and they couldn't find any kind of like black spots on her brain. So they were just like, what the fuck? What happened? And so they ended up putting her in a drug-induced coma. They had her on a trach breathing thing. It got real bad, and they thought they had ruled her out. They had told us to start, making preparing and shit. She turned around, as she does, and she's a relentless woman, and she does suffer brain damage. She has memory problems, and she's not exactly the same person that she was that night I checked on her. But she is alive. She's in a nursing home, and I'm trying to find her a better place because she's in a nursing home, and I'd rather her be in like a facility, not surrounded by people who are dying,
Right, because that's hard on people. My dad passed away in 2017. But before he passed away, I came to see him, and we went to a funeral of a relative, and he was already older, and it broke my heart to see him watch the people that because he was the last of his siblings. So it's like, he's watching everybody else around him pass away. And I felt like it was unhealthy at a certain age to go and see that, because it really begins to wear and tear on your soul, really. And I think that, so listen, 2017 was a year changer for me. It was a
bad year.
Yeah, it changed. It literally changed my life, because my dad was the only person that I felt like I knew would always be there. We weren't always close. We didn't always have the best relationship, but he had lived in the same house my entire life. So for 30 some years, he had been at the same house, had done the same. Like, it was just, I knew that I could always depend on him. So the time that he passed, processing the grief is something that is a little bit easier for me. I had a dream that he passed away, almost exactly the way it happened. was the way it happened. I mean, talking about from my cousin coming to visit and sitting next to the bed.
That's
I mean,
wild.
right there in Trotwood. Like we were sitting there and I'm like, wait, this is I've seen this in my dream before. So, and it was, so for me, processing it was difficult because I had to process losing my one parent that was actually kind
Right.
of there for me, because my mom, she's still alive, but I don't feel like I can call her for anything. I don't feel like she's
Right.
like the most stablest person to depend on. She's never been there for
Right.
me. Like so the processing of it was like going through all of the memories that I had, trying to, just embrace the lessons that I learned through those experiences. And it was hard. It's still hard. Some days I think about them. I think one of the only things that saved me from extreme grief is that he wasn't always around. So now
Okay.
him being deceased is more like those periods that I just couldn't talk to my dad, or we just
Right.
didn't have those conversations or that relationship. I definitely think it would have been worse if we were super duper tight.
Right. Of course.
And then he goes, and now I didn't got this relationship. So after I had the dream, I didn't try to make a substantial, like significant bond. It made me kind of a little bit more distant because it was
Right.
like, listen, I'm not about to set myself up for failure here.
Yeah, no, that makes I totally understand what you're saying. That was your rock, is what it sounds like, at least one of them. And while my mother did survive, it took her some months to get out of the hospital, 6 months or so. It was a long time. And so she's alive, but she's
Mhm.
just not the mother that I had
That you once
before.
knew.
And we did have a toxic relationship, and you know things are debatable, but she was there for me. I could always talk to her, and she would not even sometimes have advice because she was a very simple woman as well, but she was there and she was very supportive. And you know to lose my best friend and my mom within fucking 6 weeks of one another was fucked up.
Right.
And I don't know how I survived it, man, to be honest. And I did though. And I had a girlfriend who turned out to be very toxic. But in the beginning she wasn't. And
I mean, that's how they get you in there, because they
right,
don't show you that they're toxic in the beginning. At first, it's
right.
perfect.
And I mean toxic as in like she Johnny Depped me, like everything but shit in the bed, like everything. It was bad. And and like I hate to kind of put it this way, but to be frank, I only needed her in the beginning. Like she helped me get through that
That
very
phase. Hmm.
like yeah, that very like I was distraught. And I had already told her that I was going to stop using drugs because she was in recovery. And, in order for us to be together, I couldn't get high. And I was like, yeah, okay, well, let's do that then. And I relapsed a couple times. I ended up having to. So when my mom went into the coma, I was staying with her at the time. I had nowhere to go, nothing to do. Like that was her disability check, that their social security anyway. That was
Hmm.
keeping the lights on and stuff. And so, I had an agreement with my grandmother that, and she had a slumlord at the time, so I don't feel bad about it, but we didn't pay rent that month. And I kept that money. And then we agreed that I could have because she was in the hospital. And by the time I was talking this with my grandmother, we knew she was going to be in the hospital.
Oh
So we
wow.
agreed that I could have, the next social security, and like using those two payments to put like a down payment on like an apartment somewhere or something else. My mom would be 1000% okay with that. And so that's what I did, and I found this house now that you can't see because of the background, but
It's okay.
yeah, but I
Privacy is a privilege.
I okay. I have been here ever since. I relapsed one time in 2018 January. I don't even remember the day, and that was the last time I was able to get put on insurance, and I was able to find a doctor, so I didn't have to buy Suboxone on the street anymore. And I just slowly, just one day at a time, was a better person than I was the day yesterday, and very much lived that life. And I just, between my best friend dying and my mom going into a coma, is like, who would I be to do nothing?
Right.
Who would I be to also just give up and just like, no, like I would be doing them both a high, just immense, just disservice. I would not be doing either of them any justice to do nothing with my life.
Well, I want to say first, congratulations on your sobriety because
Thank you.
I know that it is difficult. There were times like when I had surgeries and I've had over 10 surgeries, there were times where I needed those Vicodins. There was time I
Yeah.
needed those Percocets. One because of pain, but then two because it helps numb the feelings that you're going through
Yeah.
while dealing with the pain. So when I had my first surgery, my mother never showed up. Like she didn't come to any. I've had 10 surgeries. She's been to none of them. But having to experience certain things on my own that I did not expect to or would think that you would have to go through certain things, it makes you kind of want to numb out those feelings,
Yeah.
whatever those that hurt is. So I understand the process of, overindulging, doing it for fun, and then getting
Mhm.
to a place of overindulgence. But I want to commend you for taking those steps because a lot of people, if their friends die of an overdose, they'll end up on that same path because they're binging and hurt. But the path that God set for you, that was aligned for you, allowed you to come out on the other side and now to be able to help people. That's really a comeback story. I believe that your best friend would be definitely proud of you. And I know that your mother is definitely proud of the fact that you survived addiction. And although it's a daily survival, you've survived up until this point. And I believe that their stories and the story that you've just shared will help you to continue to thrive in your sobriety. Because you have full awareness. And because you're doing the work with others, it helps you stay abreast with where you are within yourself and to keep
Right.
on track. So I just want to make sure that I say congratulations and I'm proud of you, especially being from Dayton, Ohio myself. It is very dark there. It is very grim there. It is not what it was 22 years ago.
Mm.
23 years ago is when I left. Its GM was still there. It was still thriving in
Mhm.
that
Right.
environment, and it has drastically changed.
Very.
So it is very commendable for you to stay on a good path in that environment because it is very depressing there. I'm speaking from going and leaving and coming back, and it's like, whoa, it just
Yeah.
doesn't it's no aesthetics to make you feel like you could be vibrant or accomplish
Right.
much.
Yeah, it's a very just kind of grim city. Like if you told me that Gotham was based on
Yeah,
it, I'd
yeah,
believe
yeah,
you. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. Definitely giving Gotham City vibes.
Right.
So, if there was anything about your story that you can change, would you change it, and what would that thing be?
Man, that's a great question. Because I've kind of thought about some similar things. Like, you know, of course I would, I would assume you're asking about things I'd change about myself, because
Hmm.
obviously I'd bring people back if I
Right.
could and stuff like that. But as far as myself and the way I've acted and reacted, like I don't know, everything's led me to where I'm at, and what I'm doing now, I'm in a very healthy relationship. I have a really good job, and I do have a future. And I think that the only thing I would really say is that I would be a little less reserved.
Hmm.
I think that I've hindered myself by way of like networking, and I don't just mean that professionally. I mean, like I said, with friends, like I really, isolated myself, and that's even how I got clean was isolation, which is the opposite of what you're supposed to do. But you
Some
know,
people don't realize that being able to sit with and accept your own thoughts can be the most therapeutic thing that you can go through. Of course,
yeah,
isolation is not something that anybody tells you to do, but normally the isolation helps you heal from codependency, whether that's from people, places, things. And
right,
it's been literally one of the things that has helped me because now I'm able to sit with my own thoughts. Now I'm able to figure out, okay, what's going on? Like, why do I want to get drunk? Or why do I want to do this or do that? And be able to come to peace with who I am and with my life internally. And that for a lot of people is what they cannot do. A lot of people cannot. Well, a lot of people didn't survive COVID mentally and
right.
spiritually because of not being able to just sit in the house for a second with yourself. Be okay with you.
Yeah, yeah. People were going nuts over that kind of stuff. I can't go outside. I'm like, cool. I was
Right.
uh
So, um, you said that so when it comes to asking people about changing anything about themselves or their situation, normally people do want to change things, but what I've learned in my own experience is that if you really go back through your life and think about the things that you would change, those changes would change everything. Like
everything.
the smallest little
Right,
thing could change everything drastically, better or worse. You know,
right.
sometimes you think that it would be better, and then if things went in a different direction, it could definitely be not so much better.
Yeah, yeah. You're right because with the way the butterfly effect works, and a lot of decisions I made, I believe like how I've been able to survive is because I've been walking a very thin line,
Hmm.
where I know that the decisions that I make, whether one way or the other, I'm a person who thinks, usually worst case scenario, but worst and best case scenario on
Hmm.
both sides. And I'm like, if I go this way, it could lead to this or that. And
Hmm.
yeah, so what I'm saying is if I was to go back in time and change anything, that things, yeah, would be so immensely different. And considering my losses, I'm happy where I'm at,
Right.
like aside from those, the grief that I deal with
Hmm.
daily, but there's nothing I can do to bring them back, and of course I would, but you can't guarantee. If I'm changing one thing about my own life, it would literally, because that's the only thing I think that could really brighten things without changing them too much, is kind of
Right.
making more friends, kind of networking and such. That's Other
I
than
mean,
that, I try to live with no regrets, try to.
that making friends and being acquaintances with people can be overrated sometimes, but it will when you're in a place of healing versus trauma, one, you will attract different friends, but it's hard to
Right.
attract healed people because not a lot of people want to be healed. A lot of people wallow in their depression, their shame, their drama and trauma because it's comfortable, but because it kind of, for a lot of people, it works for them and to their advantage to stay in that place. So it's harder to find friends that don't want to gossip, don't want to, do all the things that
Oh,
you've
for
worked
sure.
yourself to grow. You've grown out of the things
Yeah.
that everybody that you would have been friends with are probably still in. And until you find those people that are on your same wavelength, it'll just be like
Right.
taking you back a little bit. But I believe that finding people now will be different for you because you're on a different path. So the people that comes into
Right.
your life along the course of you following through on your purpose, it will bring you more purposeful friends, more meaningful relationships, and it will work out better now than before because you're choosing from a different place first off.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. I am in a completely different mindset, and there's just, in order to find some, and that's why that's kind of why I still, you know, don't have a big friend group,
Mhm, mhm.
because it's hard. Like so many people just are wanting to be immature in the
Mm-hmm.
dumbest of ways. And like even like, oh, I work in a professional environment. You just expect people would be in,
No,
and
no.
no, they don't.
Especially when they haven't had a lot of life experiences, hard life experiences.
Right.
So your harder life experiences, it matured you because you addressed it properly.
Right. And
But a lot of people they don't want to mature.
like you said, and like the people who are healed, they're in the same mindset where they're like, I'm cool sitting back. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
so
and they're
and
not
all the healed people in the house and all the hurt people outside. So if you go outside trying to find healed people, you might not find them because they're
right.
all in the house.
Right. So that's why
Trying
I
to
feel,
avoid.
I don't know, as far as getting out goes, like it's just like me and my girlfriend to just go seek things that make us happy. And if we
Mm-hmm.
make friends, we do. If not, we don't necessarily need them.
Right.
That's the way I see it. And, there's some things we have in mind that, we want to try, but between, um, COVID's been over for a while now, but things still are not like completely, integrated again. And between that and then also, starting a new job, you got to wait to get things rooted and stuff. Um, we still are kind of homebodies at this point in time, but we got a lot of stuff that, we're thinking about getting out there and trying. So I'm looking forward to it.
So, do you have any books to tell your story? I know you're saying you're doing a podcast that's going to be coming out soon. Is there anything else that you're working on, or how could we follow you to
I
keep up with
I
you?
wish I had a book, maybe one day. I do write. I like to write, and I have a blog which is vagabard.blogspot.com. I would really like to be able to buy out the URL, but give it some time. Vagabard.blogspot.com. I'm on Facebook.
Now, if you go to Google Domains, they're not paying me to say this, but I got all of my domain names through Google, and
Okay.
you might have to do a .org or something.
Right.
But yes, sometimes those .coms are very expensive, but they can go on sale and the price can be discounted. So I hope that you're able to get that domain the way you want it.
Yeah. Like I'm really hoping so. But then at the same time, I also need it to kind of grow into what it needs to become because
Mm-hmm.
I have a real big vision of what I want to happen for the website because it's just a blog right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to grow into a website that the community I'm building can interact on. And I am building a community, so it's like it takes some time. Um, Besides the blog, I do have a Facebook, Twitter.
Are they all the same user handles?
The only one that's different is Twitter. It's my, well, no, Twitter and it's either Verum Visand or it's Vagabard. So
Okay.
yeah, between those two, it's one or the other. Yeah.
So if there was a piece of advice that you could give for our listeners, whether they are going through something that you've gone through or not, what advice would you give?
Man, man, oh man.
Thinking like that, you got a lot of wisdom.
I mean, it's just the thing that comes to mind is just be yourself. Not just be yourself, but listen to yourself. Your intuition 9 times out of 10 is going to be right. Uh, and I mean that's kind of what we struggle with as humans, like the mind body spirit balance. Sometimes you want to follow your heart, but blah blah blah. But your intuition is the way to go. Your intuition's got it, a different vibe, man. You'll feel your way right through it. So just be yourself and express yourself however you want. Because at the end of the day, who cares?
Right. You got to
Other
live
than
with your
like,
own choices.
right, right. Like if anybody dislikes, who cares? Even if somebody likes it, who cares? You're doing it for you, So
Is there any questions that you have for me before we get out of here?
I always have questions. But I'm just interested to know more about your story, really. I can tell you got a lot of wisdom, and and I don't know, maybe I'll ask you, what do you have? I'm sure you have a closing piece of advice.
So, I do have a book. It's my time. This is
There you go.
my autobiography,
Okay.
about my life. I wrote this when I was 23. So about 17 years ago,
Okay.
I had an amazing, heart-wrenching desire to tell my story because my mother had tried to kill me when I was 17, which led me to go into the Army. And the Army really changed my life because of the structure and guidance that I didn't have. And being from Dayton, Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
um, being around DeSoto Bass
Oh
and
yeah.
all of the different projects and the rough neighborhoods, I wanted something different for myself. So that is when I decided to join the Army. I went to Dunbar High School. I went to Meadowdale for a little while, but I fought a lot. I got expelled for fighting. And at the time, and I just was explaining this to my children, when I started high school, I had got abandoned in Kentucky the like that summer right before high school started. So I was supposed to start in Dunbar, but because my mother left me in Kentucky, I didn't have a way to get to school. I didn't have a way to get home to Ohio so that I could be in school when school started. So that made me switch schools. And then I started going to Meadowdale. And when I went to Meadowdale, I it was already too late. I started hanging with the wrong people, and just
Yeah.
immediately it kind of the ball rolled a different way because I passed all the proficiency tests. I was very intelligent. I had all of these things going to where I should have graduated early probably, but because of the drama that led me to changing schools, which led me to doing drugs, smoking weed more. I'm skipping school now. I'm hanging with people that know my family, so it's cool to kind of be out of school because they know my grandmother. They know
Right.
I know their parents, so it gave it a more comfortable feeling to be a rebel, and which led me to getting expelled. And eventually, I went to the Army, and it really changed my life. It was the most pivotal thing that could have happened because I was lost. I was in the street, and I might not have ended up on any hardcore drugs, but I definitely would have had a lot of babies and would have been in some drama because that's what the city had to offer at the time. I had my whole life I wanted to work for GM. Like that was the thing
Right.
growing up in a
Yeah.
a, a plant um a plant-based city, and I'm not
Right.
talking about the diet,
And not
but
holistically. Yeah.
no, like literally, when you grow up around assembly plants like that, you automatically that's what most people aspire to.
Right.
But for me, it changed when I decided to go to the Army, and I remember guys telling me like, "Why would you do that? What if they send you to war?" And I'm thinking like, I knew a guy that got shot and killed right there on the street, so going to war would be the
Right.
same 50-50 chance.
You're
So,
right. That's
um,
true.
and so that really changed my life. I went to the Army. I was in the Army for about 4 years. I ended up getting out of the Army because I went to Iraq after having knee surgery, and I was not prepared really to be in that war zone. But I had a dream about being in Iraq. So I was like, I gotta go. And everything that I saw in my dream literally happened in Iraq. So I felt like it was destined for me to be there. And because I was there, it allowed me to live out the deja vu of the dreams that I had, which kind of set the path to me being where I am right now. So when you talk about listening to your intuition and understanding that spiritual portion of your soul and being in alignment, it resonates with me because literally I went to Iraq because I had a dream about being in Iraq. Before that, I was like, I ain't going to Iraq. Why would I go? I
Right.
ain't gotta go. I was happy I ain't have to
Right.
go. But I had that dream, and then I felt very compelled. It was a conviction even for me to go. And I went, and it literally, I got saved over there. I was speaking in tongues. I didn't know what the hell is speaking in tongues, but I'm in the
Right.
tent church trying to say thank you, God, but that was not coming out of my mouth. And I was like, what in the world? So after I got out the army, I was kind of scared to go to church for a long time because I could not control how I reacted when I was in those environments. But eventually I ended up getting saved and going to a church that was called Saving a Nation Endangered. And so I went there for a while, and I ended up getting married, having children, and I ended up leaving the church because I started questioning religion, and I started asking God to show me
Mhm.
more about the truth versus what I was seeing, because church is a business.
Right.
And that kind of led to me. I ended up, well, before that, I moved to Phoenix to help start a new church, and started studying psychology and behavior health. And
Mhm.
that really pivoted my mindset, because they teach you in psychology how church started and the basis of religion. And that
Right.
kind of put everything into perspective as far as church being a business, and really understanding the nature of God versus uh the nature of religion. So that's pretty much how I got here. I ended up getting a divorce, which was one of the best decisions that I could have made, because I started dwindling myself down to appease the relationship.
Right.
Because a lot of times when you go to church, you go to church, you get saved. After you get saved, then they tell you to get married. And because of the way that they push you into decisions, you don't make clear, rash decisions. You're making
Right.
decisions based on trying to seek approval. So I ended up marrying my ex-husband, which it was not a bad relationship. That was just not necessarily the person best fit for me. But we
Right.
had two beautiful children. I ended up getting divorced and moved back to Atlanta after moving around for a long time. And like, the rest is history. The rest is the history that I'm writing currently. Um,
Okay.
it has been a journey. It definitely has been uh a lot of lessons,
Yeah.
which allowed me to learn enough to change the habits that I had, to begin to recognize the patterns that I didn't like, and the little bit of isolation that I've had, aside from, of course, having children, really allowed me to see myself thoroughly, and to really investigate who I am and what I wanted to produce from my life moving forward. So now I'm here, and I am trying to help share as many people's journey to freedom as possible, because my journey um has inspired me, but it has inspired others as well. And I just want to be an inspiration to the world.
I hear you. I hear you. I really enjoyed this talk, and I look forward to future talks. I'd really like to come back on and formally invite you to come on to mine.
Definitely.
You
I
know,
definitely, once we get finished, you can send me all the information, and we'll chat after this.
okay.
But I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. It is difficult for some people to share their stories, especially when it comes with recovery, and
Yeah.
just recovery from any type of addiction is difficult, because there's so much shame around it that it makes people hesitant to share. But I really appreciate you opening up and sharing your story. I know it will help some people.
Absolutely. Anytime, and I agree on the on like I have this piece that I'll probably never finish writing, but it's called The Power of Influence, and it's just a think piece. Like I said, I'll probably never finish.
You will
Um,
finish.
but
It, it,
but
it
it's just an
when with
ongoing
writing,
thing, you know.
it comes in time. So as a
Right.
writer, um, when I wrote that book, it was fresh. It needed to come out. It was like a healing type of
Right.
thing. But as I've written other books, it's been more of I have to experience certain portions of it for it to be ready to come out and come
I see
through
what you're
me.
saying.
So in time, when the time is right, the rest of what needs to come out will flow.
I agree. I agree. And yeah, so I respect that, and I feel that with the power of influence and how the flow of time works in that way, um I debate everything happens for a reason. It's a good debate I like to have, but it's hard to deny it sometimes. So I don't know. I just want to thank you for having me on, and I hope that my words do land into somebody's ears that need to hear it, because I'm somebody who likes to. I'm a storyteller, and I have lived a lot of shit,
Right,
good and
right.
bad, and you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is I feel like I have a gift to be open, and not everybody can be open, like you said. So I hope somebody that needs to hear it does.
Well, I definitely appreciate you. And we're going to talk soon as we wrap this up. But until next time, family, see you later.
We'll see you then. Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this video, like, share, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. New episode every Friday.